pleasure to be here, but I think for me it's important to be with you. I will begin simply by saying that no child in the world should be afraid to lose its home, its family, simply overnight. And yet, that's a brutal reality that many children had faced and are still facing. Most people, when they think about war, are probably thinking about classical armed conflicts, about bombs, explosions, or drones today. And I often wonder how conscious we really are about all the violence and cruel acts that the war brings with it. I mean, Russians attacked on purpose civilian infrastructure to make the Ukrainians suffer from cold during the cold winters in Ukraine. They tried to terrorize the population. They tried to, in fact, dehumanize the population. In fact, they tried to break the Ukrainian population. And as Alexandra Madichuk said, and a few minutes ago, we lost the human dimension. Simply, we lost the human dimension. And I think that's in 4 words exactly what is happening. We all heard what was said by Xenia, by Alexandra, and I can't even start to imagine what it must feel like to endure such a nightmare, to be taken from your family, to be removed from your community, and to be subjected to processes that erase your identity, your language, and your sense of belonging. You mentioned that I visited Bucha a year ago. And I have to tell you, I talked a lot with, I would tell them, the survivors of this massacre, which happened there. They told, some of them told me their stories and what happened to their family. And I can't imagine the despair of these families. I can't imagine it. And it's difficult, I can't hardly speak about it. But I think that is just what we have to do. Speak out, tell like you did it today, just tell what we heard, explain what we heard, and don't let those things being forgotten, because that's what the other side simply wants. Luxembourg is a democratic country that stands for democracy, the rule of law, and for fundamental rights. We rely on international law and have always advocated for its respect. Unfortunately, this only works when all parties pull in the same direction. Once one or more states decide to not do this anymore, it unravels the whole world order. The consequences of such acts are tragic. They spill blood, cost lives, and traumatize generations of people. And that's what's happening today. Last week, the UN members of the Commission of Inquiry of Ukraine confirmed what we already knew to be true. Russian authorities committed deportation and forcible transfer of children, as well as the enforced disappearance. Acts that qualify as crimes against humanity. Acts that violate the 89 United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. When legal instruments aren't respected anymore, we need to make sure those violations don't go unnoticed. Children are the most vulnerable members of our society that need protection the most, and we can't afford to fail them. It is important to acknowledge those crimes, to talk about them publicly. We need to raise international awareness on child abduction in Ukraine by Russia. Advocacy is an important but often underestimated arm we must use to combat injustice. So through international dialogue, we can bring together gathered forces and go to action. What we need is continued support for international investigations, building reliable databases, and strengthen cooperation with bodies tasked with tracing missing children. It is our moral obligation to continually remind people what is going on in this war. On this note, I would really like to thank the organizers for today's event and their continued efforts, and my deepest respect for the courage of the two speakers we had the privilege of hearing today. This means what we have to do, supporting ongoing investigations, strengthening cooperation with institutions responsible for tracing missing children and investigating in reliable systems to document and verify cases. It also means consistently reminding the international community that these violations are happening and that they demand a response. Now, we've asked ourselves in Parliament the question, what can we as a national parliament do for it? I mean, we are setting a legal framework for protecting children in a more general context. We are asking parliamentary questions. We are voting motions. We are organizing debates to hold the government accountable. That's what we are doing in a normal weeks, and it's our daily work. And we have been clear as the Luxembourg Parliament for the last 3 or 4 years, voting several motions on it. And I mean, voting motions doesn't mean, in fact, really anything, except, and that's why we are doing it repeatedly, what it helps is just making the Luxembourgish population aware that this war is still ongoing and making clear and sure that it hasn't to be forgotten. And even if other wars are happening around the world and is a total world disorder is in this moment happening, this is still a burning point of the European continent, and we don't have to forget it, and we have to continue to support it, because without the support of the European countries and the hope of so much other countries, it would be very difficult for the Ukrainians to resist, and they are resisting already for a very long time. And of course, we have to support our government by voting the necessary budgets that are needed. Of course, we have to make publicity of our parliamentary work to keep the issue visible in public and political debate. And of course, it's also to have contact with the Ukrainian politicians, to give them the possibility to speak to our population and to explain, like you explained today, to explain what happened. We had Speaker Stefanchuk a few months ago here in Luxembourg, and it was not just to make show, it was just that he had the opportunity to explain politicians, but through politicians, through parliament, to the Luxembourgish population, what is the real situation and where precisely the Ukrainians need help. And he did it in a very simple way. And I have to tell you, it moved us all in parliament. And I mean, if they can put it like this, it makes it totally impossible to reduce the budget for Ukraine. In contrary, it made it so obvious and so clear that this effort had to be continued over the years, and not just over the years, but until the goals are reached. And I think that's what we have to do. And allow me to conclude by thanking the organizers for bringing us together today and for their continued commitment to this critical issue. I would also like to express my deepest respect, one more time, for your courage and your coming to Parliament tomorrow. And I think it's important, to explain exactly to parliamentarians what you did today, to explain the truth of what's happening in your country. So thank you for coming. Thank you very much.